9. Juan Luis Lagunas Rosales. 17-year-old Juan Luis Lagunas Rosales had over 1 million followers on his YouTube channel, where he often made videos of himself drinking heavily and being a public menace. While drunk one night in 2017, the influencer made a video directing an emasculating insult at the notorious drug lord Nemesio Osegera Cervantes. Commonly known as El Mencho, Cervantes is considered one of Mexico's most dangerous men and has a $5 million bounty on his head. And his loyal men didn't take too kindly to what Rosales had to say about their boss. While out partying at a bar in Jalisco, a group of armed men from the cartel stormed in and began firing at Rosales, shooting him 18 times. They also killed a bartender who sadly just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time in the line of fire. Rosales likely meant for this to be a stunt to generate shock value and entertain people, but he unfortunately went too far and learned the hard way that there are some things that you just shouldn't joke about. 8. Katia da Silva Sastre. Off-duty military police officer Katia da Silva Sastre was at a Mother's Day lunch with her 7-year-old son in Sao Paulo, Brazil, back in 2018 when a man tried to commit an armed robbery. He began shooting at a crowd of women and children right outside a school. Katia went from mom mode to cop mode in a split second as she pulled her gun out and shot the violent criminal in the chest. He quickly fell to the ground after 2 shots, and Ms. da Silva Sastre kicked his gun away. The suspect died not long after from his injuries. The Sao Paulo state government recognized the quick-thinking officer for her swift, life-saving actions. Addressing a crowd, da Silva Sastre pointed out how criminals can get out of control fast, and that her first instinct was to do what was necessary to protect the mothers, kids, and guards the gunman was shooting at. While Sao Paulo's homicide rate is much lower than Rio de Janeiro's, violence is unfortunately something people have to be diligent about in all Brazilian cities, where kidnappings, muggings, and assaults happen frequently. 7. Willie Murphy. 82-year-old bodybuilding grandmother Willie Murphy works out daily and is in remarkable shape for her age. But naturally, most people would doubt her ability to take on a much younger, grown man. Willie's strength was put to the test one night in 2019 when a man broke into her Rochester, New York home while she was getting ready for bed, and to the surprise of many, she passed with flying colors. Murphy confidently spoke about the experience to local news station WUHF, stating right off the bat that while she may be old, she's undoubtedly tough. She went on to describe how she picked a table up and used it to beat the intruder while a 911 dispatcher was on the line. The table broke, so she took one of the metal legs and jabbed the man with it before jumping on him. Next, Murphy went into her kitchen, grabbed a bottle of baby shampoo, came back to the living room where the man was still laying on the floor, and poured the entire bottle in his face. She then started hitting him with a broom. At that point, the burglar realized he'd made a huge mistake breaking into this elderly woman's home and decided it was time to leave. Murphy also wanted him to get out and was more than happy to help speed up his exit. But the intruder was having trouble getting up off the floor and was too heavy for Murphy to lift by herself. The man ended up needing to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and Murphy later recalled how he seemed relieved to get out of there and away from her. 6. First-degree black belt refuses to be a victim. One night in October 2010, a young Tulsa man named Josh was woken up by his car alarm. Someone had broken into his Jeep the night before, and he wasn't about to let it happen again. He ran outside quickly and chased the thief on foot until he caught up with the man. Josh then yanked the thief to the ground by grabbing his shirt. The pair started to fight, and the burglar then pulled a knife and stabbed Josh. Instead of backing away, Josh, who holds a first-degree black belt in a Korean martial art known as Tang Soo Do, fought for the knife, but punctured his hand in the process. So he began punching the thief in the face, finally letting up after the 11th or 12th hit. Worried that he seriously hurt the guy, Josh ran home to call an ambulance and grab some first aid supplies. But when he came back to the scene of the fight, the thief was gone. Even a police helicopter and ground search crew failed to locate the burglar. Josh ended up getting 36 stitches for his stab wounds, while the police asked the public for help identifying the suspect. It's still unclear whether the thief was ever found. 5. Grandmother outsmarts scammer. A 73-year-old grandmother and former police dispatcher from Long Island named Jean got a phone call earlier this year from someone claiming to be one of her grandsons. The man said he was in jail and was being arrested on a DUI charge, but none of her grandsons were old enough to drive. So Jean immediately knew she was being targeted by a scammer. Jean decided she wasn't going to let this crook get away with pulling a fast one on her. So she played along and engaged in several phone calls before someone claiming to be her grandson's lawyer said he needed $8,000 for bail. She said she had the money in cash at her house and called the police in the meantime to let them know what was happening. Jean was surprised when the scammer agreed to come pick the cash up in person. But sure enough, someone claiming to be a bail bondsman showed up at her door and eagerly took an envelope stuffed with paper towels that she handed him. As he turned to walk away from the house, 2 police officers who had been watching nearby arrested him. The alleged scammer was identified as 28-year-old Joshua Estrella Gomez. He was later charged with third-degree attempted grand larceny. 4. Alan Rolski. Known as the Godfather of Spam, Alan Rolski's extensive spamming career began in 1996 after he lost his license to sell insurance. At the time, the internet was just starting to become a household name, and he saw it as an incredible opportunity to take advantage of people without having to even leave his house. In what's known as a pump and dump scam, he started sending bulk emails to random addresses, advertising cheap stocks with little potential for growth as good opportunities to invest in something that would make a lot of money. Many people happily took the bait and bought up these so-called penny stocks, causing their value to temporarily increase. Once the stocks reached the maximum amount of shares sold, Rolski sold all of his shares and made a large profit at the expense of his victims. The operation started out small and eventually grew to be an international multi-million-dollar scamming operation that even had staff members. Unlike many other scammers, Rolski made little effort to hide his lavish lifestyle and openly spoke to the media, thinking he could smooth-talk the public into believing he was doing nothing wrong. By then, though, a growing number of people had caught on to his egregious and highly illegal business. They were still receiving his junk emails and were fed up, so they decided to give Rolski a taste of his own medicine by spamming his actual mailbox. Savvy internet users came together on a message forum, published Rolski's physical home address, and signed him up for as many junk mail outlets as possible. Soon enough, the crooked businessman was getting bombarded with hundreds of pounds of junk email per day. Rolski was not amused by this influx of spam and claimed he was being unfairly harassed. But the prank became the least of his worries after federal authorities arrested him for his elaborate schemes. He pleaded guilty to a long list of charges, including wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. It may not seem like much compared to the gravity of his crimes, but the court of public opinion has been far less forgiving. People are quick to show that they haven't forgotten about Rolski, the disgraced scam artist. 3. Musicians spread a message. Members of the Canadian folk pop group Sons of Maxwell were shocked in 2008 to see United Airlines employees handling their luggage with extreme carelessness while they waited for their flight to Omaha. When they got to their destination, the musicians found that one of their group members' $3,500 guitar had been broken. It belonged to Dave Carroll, and he reached out to the airline to get compensation for the instrument. 9 months later, after spending $1,200 out of pocket on repairs, his request was denied on multiple grounds, including Carroll's alleged failure to file a complaint within 24 hours after the incident. With this disappointing response, the crafty songwriter did what he does best and wrote a song called United Breaks Guitars, detailing his horrific experience with the airline. During the song, he even specifically called out the customer service representative who denied his request for reimbursement. The music video went viral almost instantly, getting over 1 million hits within 4 days. And soon enough, other musicians were coming forward about their experiences with United mishandling their instruments. For a month, United Breaks Guitars was the #1 music video in the world. Carroll even landed a record deal and was invited by the Taylor Manufacturing Company to choose 2 brand new guitars. At the same time, United's stock dropped 10%. And while it was already starting to lose traction before the viral song came out, Carroll's public awareness campaign undoubtedly helped its decline. To make things right, United gave Carroll $1,200 in flight vouchers and $1,200 in cash. His creative way of drawing attention to the problem helped usher in a new era of accountability when it comes to the customer service companies provide. The situation also gave customers a new way to seek justice for their belongings. 2. Father takes justice into his own hands. In 1982, a French accountant named André Bamberski was 44 years old when he got the worst phone call of his life, saying his teenage daughter, Kalinka, had died under mysterious circumstances. An autopsy found evidence that someone had attacked her, showing injuries and injection marks, leading Bamberski to suspect Kalinka's stepfather, a doctor named Dieter Krombach, could have killed her. Police failed to re-interview Krombach, even though he was the last person that saw Kalinka alive, and the stories he initially gave weren't adding up. Krombach was a doctor, and it seemed like he might have had help covering up evidence and avoiding an investigation. Bamberski campaigned relentlessly for his daughter's alleged killer to be prosecuted. Even after France declared Krombach a wanted man, Germany refused to extradite him, and he became difficult to track down. After nearly 30 years went by with no action from law enforcement, Bamberski took justice into his own hands in 2009. Knowing the statute of limitations for pursuing the murder was nearly up, he paid several men 5 figures to kidnap Krombach and bring him to France, where he could finally be arrested and tried for Kalinka's murder. As promised, the men kidnapped 74-year-old Krombach in Germany, drove him to France, and beat him up before leaving him chained to a fence near a police station. During his trial, several other women came forward and testified about being assaulted and abused by Krombach in ways that matched Kalinka's autopsy. Justice was finally served in 2011 when Krombach received a 15-year prison sentence for his crimes. He was released from prison in 2020 for health reasons and died later that year. And while it's unfortunate that he got away with his sickening actions for most of his life, he at least paid some of his debt to society thanks to one father's fierce refusal to let his daughter's attacker walk free. 1. Michael Irving. One night in 2017, a 62-year-old former U.S. Marine named Michael Irving answered the door at his home in Theodore, Alabama. He came face to face with 3 intruders who immediately shot him. Luckily, a plexiglass door frame slowed down the bullets enough for Irving to survive. From that point on, his military instincts took over. Irving rushed over to a cabinet where he had a vintage pistol and quickly shot all 3 men. He didn't want to kill them, so he avoided aiming at their chests. Thanks to his quick thinking, the burglars were taken down before they could cause any further harm. They were treated at a nearby hospital and then arrested for their crimes. Irving later told local news station WKRG that his military training taught him to react quickly in the face of danger before giving fear a chance to take over. By the time the intrusion happened, he had been battling cancer for 2 years and had already been victimized in a previous burglary by thieves who stole his medication, and he made sure this time that that wouldn't happen again.
10. Enraged Elephants. In early 2016, a visitor at an elephant park on the island of Koh Samui in Thailand captured alarming footage of a handler repeatedly jabbing an elephant in the face with a bull hook. 24-year-old British tourist Kelly Ackerman later told the Daily Mail that she didn't like what she saw the trainer was doing, so she pulled out her phone and began recording his behavior. She said that the elephant didn't appear to be doing anything to warrant such horrific treatment, and that the abuse began seemingly out of nowhere. Ackerman was also put off by the conditions the park's animals were kept in, describing the enclosures as tiny and terrible. The disturbing footage was captured the week before another British tourist, 36-year-old Gareth Crowe, was killed by an angry elephant at the same park in what seemed like an unprovoked attack. Crowe and his teenage stepdaughter were riding the animal when it suddenly turned against them, throwing them off its back and onto the ground. It then proceeded to stomp on Crowe and gored him with its tusks before running off into the forest. After news of the tragedy surfaced, Ackerman shared her video and said that she thinks the attack might have stemmed from the way the park treats its elephants. After all, a creature can only take so much abuse before becoming prone to aggression and lashing out. Witnesses said that they saw a handler hitting the elephant with a stick shortly before the deadly ride, so Ackerman's explanation seems likely. 9. Bear vs. Hunter. A 62-year-old man was bear hunting in Russia's Irkutsk region recently when he shot a bear from a nearby platform. Thinking he'd subdued the animal, the hunter got down from the platform and approached the bear, only for the dying animal to attack him and crush his skull. The man was reported missing, and it wasn't until law enforcement thoroughly searched the forest that they found his bloody remains, which were covered in bite and claw wounds. They located the bear's corpse roughly 160 feet, 46 meters from the hunter's body. Most of Russia's 264 recorded bear attacks between 1991 and 2017 happened in Siberia and along the country's Pacific coast, according to Newsweek. Attacks are more common in areas with higher bear populations and where bears are less afraid of humans than normally. Typically, a bear will avoid contact with a human and will run away unless they feel provoked or threatened. In the case of the recently killed hunter, it's understandable why the creature became aggressive as soon as he was approached. 8. Stray dogs' supportive friends. One day in 2015, a driver in Chongqing, China found a stray dog napping in his parking space. So he got out of his car and cruelly kicked the animal out of the way, ignoring the age-old advice that it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. Later that day, the pup returned with some of his canine buddies and laid siege to the car, chewing up the frame and windshield wipers and causing other damage to its body. The driver was shocked the next day when a neighbor who witnessed the revenge explained that a pack of dogs was responsible. Sadly, China has very little protection in place in the way of anti-cruelty laws. A person can only get in trouble for harming or stealing a dog that belongs to someone, since the animal is then considered someone's property. But in a place where there are no legal consequences for hurting an animal with no owner, stray dogs are especially vulnerable. Looking at it from this angle, hopefully the dogs who damaged the car found somewhere else to go and managed not to cross paths with the vehicle's owner, who would be at liberty to punish them any way he saw fit without penalty. 7. Anna Karuso. One day in 2019, 21-year-old Anna Karuso of LaGrangeville, New York, set out to prove to her boyfriend that she could fit inside her suitcase. But her 7-year-old cat Sam was less than humored by the prank when Anna popped out of the luggage and instinctively took a few swipes at its owner, leaving her covered with bloody gashes and torn leggings. Even after the initial panic wore off, the shocked feline was still taken aback by the situation and continued walking around the room with utmost caution, hissing and clawing at Anna for another minute or so. As a kennel worker, Anna's experienced enough with animals to know that it was understandable for Sam to feel threatened. In a Twitter post, she said that he'd never attacked her like that before, and that the incident left her, her brother, and her mother all shaken. But Sam eventually calmed down and was over the whole ordeal by nighttime, when he crawled into Anna's bed and slept with her as if nothing had happened. 6. Tiger terrorizes poacher. Naturally, conflicts between humans and wild animals are especially common in places where they live in close proximity to one another. This is definitely the case in many parts of India, where growing human populations are increasingly encroaching upon territory that elephants, tigers, and other creatures never had to share until somewhat recently. Poaching is also a major issue, and as one group of men learned in 2016, some animals don't forget who they are and will seek vengeance at the first opportunity. The men were carrying out an illegal liquor operation in the jungle in the state of Kerala when an angry male tiger viciously killed a group member nicknamed Baby, who also happened to be a notorious poacher in the area. Authorities soon learned that another one of the men named Thambi had recently killed the male tiger's partner, leaving them to conclude that the big cat had slaughtered Baby out of revenge. Just days after Thambi killed the tigress and divided her meat up among the group, Baby was alone in the jungle while the rest of the group went to retrieve some supplies. It was during this time that the male tiger attacked Baby, who was rushed to the hospital as soon as his friends found him, but died from his injuries. While it's not known for sure whether the incident was an act of vengeance, it sure seems that way, and there have been numerous other tiger attacks that seem to support the idea that these ferocious felines aren't quick to forget when they've been wronged. 5. Leopard lashes out at park ranger. When a female leopard began feeding on villagers' livestock in and around Kenya's Lake Nakuru National Park, they called on park rangers to remove the animal. The rangers put the feline in the cage and drove her elsewhere, but when they got to the area where they planned to rehome her, she refused to exit the cage. A ranger named Alexander Rono poked the big cat with a stick, hoping it would motivate her to run off into the wilderness. But the leopard stayed put, roaring at Rono in response to his poking, and even biting down on the stick at one point. After he finally convinced her to leave the cage, instead of fleeing into nature, she tried jumping into the front seat of the truck where Rono was sitting. He scrambled to roll up the vehicle's windows, but the leopard kept lunging at the truck and managed to get her body halfway in. She viciously tore the man's face with her 3-inch claws while trying to clamp her teeth down on his neck. At one point, Rono's hand was in her mouth. The feline had got nearly her entire body into the truck when Rono managed to kick her back out of the window, at which point she finally ran away. Rono was left severely injured. he nearly went blind and needed 21 stitches to close up his wounds. 4. Bear wrecks hunter's car. 3 men were hunting in the Siberian wilderness in 2014 when they were approached by a huge brown bear. One of the hunters responded by shooting the creature in the thigh, causing the animal to flee the scene. The group assumed that that was the end of the situation, but they realized that they were woefully mistaken the next morning when the man who shot the bear found his car completely wrecked. The windshield was smashed, lights were broken, the body was scratched and dented, the rear bumper was ripped off, and the seats were torn according to the Siberian Times. Paw prints and claw marks found at the scene prove that the culprit was definitely a bear. In a true nod to the animal's feelings about what had happened, the other 2 hunters' cars were left untouched. At first, one of the men told his friend that he must have had something sweet inside his car that the bear wanted to get to. But the hunter said that he didn't have anything in the vehicle that would normally attract a bear. The trio theorized that the disgruntled beast must have used its sense of smell to specifically locate the vehicle belonging to the hunter he was mad at. When all was said and done, the car owner was left with a unique predicament, finding out if his auto insurance covered bear-related damage. 3. Tiger's vengeance. While hunting in Russia's Far East in 1997, Vladimir Markov shot and injured a Siberian tiger and stole part of its kill. Somewhere between 12 and 48 hours later, the tiger meticulously tracked down Markov's cabin, went inside, and completely destroyed everything in it that carried the man's scent. The big cat then sat near the front door and waited for Markov to return. When he walked through the front door, the tiger slashed him to death, dragged him off into the wilderness, and feasted on his corpse. The harrowing ordeal is recounted in John Vailant's book, The Tiger, which explores the concept of wild animals holding grudges against humans. Speaking with National Public Radio, Vaillant pointed out how the tiger's actions were very thought out and deliberate. In other words, the big cat had a plan and a specific target, and the patience and skill to pull it off. One thing's for sure, Markov certainly underestimated the animal's intelligence and wasn't expecting to enter his cabin and come face to face with imminent death. This wasn't an impulsive response, Vaillant told NPR, adding that he thinks the tiger's decision to eat Markov was secondary to its main goal, which was simply to kill him. As Vaillant put it, he killed him because he had a bone to pick. Also known as Amur tigers, Siberian tigers can weigh over 500 pounds and measure as long as 10 feet from nose to tail. They're incredibly fast and can jump as high as they need to, in Vailant's words. So if you're going to upset one, it's probably a good idea to make sure that it can't come after you later on, as Markov's failure to do so proved fatal. 2. Cautious crows. In 2011, Live Science reported on a group of Seattle-based researchers who learned the hard way that crows are incredibly smart animals who remember people's faces. They tracked the birds for 5 years, which involved capturing some of them and attaching identification bands to their legs. The team soon noticed that crows found ways to make it clear that certain researchers were unwelcome in their territory. They would swoop toward team members and make disapproving noises, leading the scientists to conclude that the birds held grudges against the people who'd captured and tagged them for tracking purposes. To test their theory, the team began wearing masks out into the forest when catching and tagging the birds. They found that the crows remembered specific masks even if they hadn't seen them in over a year. The birds even taught their offspring which faces to look out for, as the researchers learned when the baby birds began swooping toward them and making warning noises even though they'd never witnessed those team members handling crows firsthand. It's just one of many examples of our tendency to underestimate how intelligent some animals can be. 1. Elephant versus elderly woman. A village in India's Odisha state was left shaken recently when an elephant viciously attacked a 70-year-old elderly woman to death in the nearby jungle. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and died from her injuries. Her family took her body back to the village to prepare for her funeral. During the preparations, the elephant returned to the village and aggressively stomped on the woman's corpse. The animal then began calling on other members of its herd to join in and help attack the village. It destroyed the woman's house and killed several goats while the other elephants laid siege to nearby homes. Panicked villagers fled the scene. When they returned, they witnessed the angry elephant lifting the woman's corpse and destroying it in a brutal act of finality. Officials can only speculate on what caused the attack, but the seemingly unprovoked violence has left many wondering if the elephant was angry about some recent acts of poaching in the region and needed someone to take out its rage on. This certainly wouldn't be the first example of what seems like an elephant exacting justice for a long-held grudge against humans. It's been known to happen elsewhere in India and is common in villages in the East African country of Kenya. Some scientists believe that elephants can become conditioned to dislike humans in general, seeing us as competition and a threat. And as these incidents continue to happen with more alarming frequency, it's hard to argue against this theory. 10. Sleepy chicken snatcher. Stacy Stedman woke up one day last fall to find an intruder napping in the guest bedroom of her Canton, Ohio home. He had broken in overnight, helped himself to some leftover chicken, and gone for a dip in the family's pool before catching some shut-eye. The alarmed resident told the Canton Repository news team that she went into the guest bedroom after noticing that there was a light on in there and found the burglar snoozing away in the bed. Stacy's husband, Raymond Pearson, said that he had noticed a shirtless man near the house when he was leaving for work at around 4 o'clock in the morning that day. He waited for the suspicious-looking stranger to walk by and then drove to his job, not thinking that the man would end up in his house. Raymond's brother, Brian Pearson, chased the unwelcome guest out of the house. It was later found out that before making his exit, he stole a pair of underwear from Stacy's son. He had reportedly left his own wet drawers near the family's pool after taking a swim. The family was left shaken that someone had effortlessly gotten inside and made themselves right at home. Stacy pointed out that the man seemed quite comfortable and that he even lit a candle in the bathroom like their house was an Airbnb. Police apprehended the suspect shortly after the incident and charged him with trespassing. They reported that he seemed under the influence, which makes sense. After all, nobody in their right mind would walk into a stranger's house and act like they own the place. 9. Legoland license. After leading police on a 35-mile chase from London to Kent earlier this year, all the 21-year-old driver had was a Legoland ID. The toy license was dated to 2003, meaning the offender received it when they were around 2 years old. And while the cops are often unamused by the ridiculous shenanigans that they deal with in their line of work, even they couldn't resist laughing at the pretend proof. Legoland licenses are issued to children after they pass a mock driving test at the theme park in Windsor. It's unknown why the driver had the ID in their vehicle and whether they actually expected to pass it off as real. On a more serious note, the high-speed pursuit was rather serious, involving 2 police forces and a helicopter. It ended when the suspect's vehicle ran out of gas in the town of Minster. All things considered, the offender is fortunate that nobody was hurt by their reckless behavior. In addition to the fictitious license, officers reportedly recovered a large amount of marijuana from the car. They charged the driver with a slew of drug and driving-related crimes, including dangerous driving, failure to stop, drug possession, and driving without a license or insurance. 8. Bad judgment call. In October of last year, police in Fountain Valley, California responded to a call about a robbery at a local Chase Bank branch. They learned that the suspect had entered the building, handed the teller a note with his demands, and then fled the scene with a large amount of cash. He was gone by the time officers arrived and was subsequently identified as 33-year-old Samuel Brown. Less than 24 hours later, the cops received a call about another robbery at the same bank. This time, they got to the scene while Brown was still there and took him into custody on multiple charges related to the robberies. He reportedly cooperated with the responding officers and was apprehended without incident, perhaps because it wasn't his first time being arrested for stealing. In a press release, the Fountain Valley Police Department revealed that Brown already had multiple robbery convictions in San Diego prior to catching his most recent charges. He pleaded not guilty to the charges and was held on a $172,000 bail. In the meantime, police declined to comment on how much money he stole, what the hold-up note said, or whether the suspect was armed. 7. Tour de France pile-up. In June of 2021, The iconic Tour de France bicycle race made history with one of the event's worst pileups ever. The chaos began on the first day of the event, when a woman held up a banner near the finish line in an attempt to be seen on TV, obstructing the path of German cyclist Tony Martin. He hit the woman's sign and fell, triggering a sort of domino effect. Dozens of other cyclists were taken down after Martin, while others veered away from the wreckage and into the crowd. At least 8 athletes were injured, and at least 2 had to pull out of the race entirely, including Spanish cyclist Marc Soler, who broke both arms. The 31-year-old French woman, who was later blamed for the crash, fled the scene and evaded police for 4 days before finally turning herself in. She was charged with endangering lives and causing unintentional injuries, but the public punished her well before the law got around to it, and her name was withheld from news reports after she received horrifying threats and harassment online. Prosecutors noted that the woman was genuinely humiliated and anguished over the needless suffering she'd caused. She was fined €1,200, $1,357, £1,028, and was also ordered to pay a symbolic €1 fine to the International Association of Riders to raise awareness against dangerous fan behavior at the Tour de France. 6. Call of Duty. 36-year-old Clint Butler managed to evade police for several months after escaping jail from Birmingham, England in November 2020. He'd already served 14 years of a 17-year sentence for robbery and weapons possession when he decided he'd had his fill of life behind bars and made a run for it. It wasn't until January of 2021 that Butler ended up back in police custody. He emerged from hiding to go to the store with a friend and buy a copy of the new Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War video game that had just hit store shelves. The fugitive and his friend caught officers' attention when they noticed the pair suspiciously turning around and traveling in another direction, as if they were avoiding crossing paths with law enforcement. A cop asked Butler's friend why they were out and about during lockdown, to which the man replied that they were just out to buy the video game and couldn't just sit around. Police later said that Butler initially gave a fake name. When they told the man that they were about to run their information, Butler allegedly began kicking and punching the officers. He was soon back in prison with 2 additional years tacked onto his sentence for escaping from jail and assaulting the officers. Butler was already at the tail end of his sentence when he broke out. If he'd just remained patient, he could have seen freedom a little sooner than he will now. 5. Brother murderers. After noticing a car on the side of the road in the middle of the night with its hazard lights on last year in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, state troopers assumed that the vehicle was disabled and pulled over to help. There was also another car parked nearby, oddly with nobody inside. While investigating the scene, a trooper noticed a man near a gravel road close to the vehicles. He called out but got no response. When he got closer, he saw that the suspect had blood on his shoes and was wearing a glove on one of his hands. Troopers were in the process of detaining the man, later identified as 17-year-old Joshua Gamble, when they heard someone running nearby. A second suspect emerged from the woods and ran towards one of the parked cars, but was stopped by the officers. The new suspect was Joshua's 19-year-old brother Anthony, who also had bloodstains on his clothing and had a pair of plastic work gloves sticking out of his pocket. According to a press release, law enforcement found a substantial amount of blood in Anthony's car, along with a large knife. After the boys were detained, the troopers searched the nearby woods, where they found the remains of a 26-year-old New Jersey man named Kevin Rosales. His body contained numerous stab wounds to his neck, arm, upper chest, and head. Although the circumstances of the situation were unclear, detectives determined that Rosales was most likely killed at the scene and charged the Gamble brothers with criminal homicide along with several other crimes. It was announced late last year that the case is slated to go to trial sometime in the near future. 4. Iconic face. In March of early 2019, a robber entered a bank in Gulfport, Mississippi, spent several minutes in the lobby, then approached a teller and passed them a note stating, "You have 1 minute to give the money, do not be wrong or die." Authorities released surveillance images and described the culprit's face as appearing swollen from plastic surgery, in hopes that someone might recognize them. The suspect was soon identified as 39-year-old Iconic Face, formerly known as Jimmy Lewis. Her history of robbing banks to fund her plastic surgery procedures dates at least as far back as 2008, when she pulled off a heist to pay for the gender reassignment surgery. After she fell under suspicion for her more recent robberies, police traced her whereabouts by tracking her cell phone. It was soon discovered that Iconic could use the $4,800 from her most recent heist to fly to Mexico to get some work done on her face. When she returned to the US a little over a month after the robbery, police were waiting to take her into custody at the airport. She'd tried to move through the airport quietly, but it wasn't hard for authorities to spot her bandage-covered, swollen face. Iconic pleaded guilty to 2 counts of robbery and received a 15-year prison sentence. 3. Say cheese. One evening in March of last year, a mother of 2 dialed 911 and reported that a woman had pried open a window screen and was trying to enter her Tulsa, Oklahoma home. By the time officers arrived, the intruder had already fled the scene, leaving behind a bottle of water and an empty bag of Cheetos on the floor near the open window. Police suspected that the burglar had dropped the items and forgot about them during her hasty exit. While detectives combed the scene, the suspect emerged from the shadows. The victim recognized her and pointed her out as the alleged burglar. Officers noticed orange Cheeto dust on the women's teeth and concluded that they must have found their culprit, who was later identified as Sharon Carr. In a Facebook post, the Tulsa Police Department jokingly cited the arrest as a good reminder that Cheeto dust can be pretty hard to get rid of. They charged Carr with first-degree burglary and said that she gave no reason for committing the crime. 2. A needless collision. After being cancelled in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, an annual bicycle race in Spain's Canary Islands, known as the Salmor Bike, got off to a rough and disappointing start late last year. Plenty of spectators and 270 participants showed up to the event, which was held on the island of El Hierro. Things took an alarming turn when a man was seen walking right into the road that the race was happening on. Luckily, he was unharmed, but another woman who unsuspectingly walked into the oncoming bike traffic was less fortunate. Shocking footage captured the moment a cyclist smacked right into her, hitting her with such force that she needed emergency medical treatment. The cyclist was also injured and was taken to a local hospital. A statement from the local council confirmed the collision but released limited details, citing an ongoing police investigation. Local media outlets accused the event's organizers of failing to put sufficient barriers near the final part of the course to warn pedestrians to stay out of the road. Spectators were also left wondering why more wasn't done to ensure the safety of both the crowd and the cyclists, with one fan writing on social media that they don't understand how the organizers could have allowed something like this to happen. 1. Stay away from my ex. A 20-year-old Connecticut woman named Shannon Caspia made headlines in 2015 after she allegedly misspelled the word whore while keying it into her best friend's car. Reports claim that Caspia had suspected her girl pal of hooking up with her ex-boyfriend and keyed their cars and slashed their tires in an act of revenge, leaving the female victim's vehicle with the word war etched into the side. Caspia's ex-boyfriend reportedly received numerous text messages from the scorned woman, alluding to her responsibility for the vandalism, and she allegedly admitted outright to the act in one of the texts. When questioned by police, Caspia denied any involvement in the act and was initially let go without any charges. As she left the station, she snapped a photo of herself outside the building and posted it on social media along with the caption, "Stamford police have nothing on me." But, as she would soon learn, she was wrong. Not long after her first round of questioning, Caspia was charged with criminal mischief and taken into custody. After posting her $10,000 bond, she was released. She continued referencing the incident in her social media posts, but started complaining about the unwanted attention she was getting after the story went viral. Thanks for watching. Would you ever rob a bank to pay for something extremely important to you? Let us know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.